Our next guest began as a diabetes researcher, and she now heads the Michael Smith Foundation. She has had to understand some of health research's most intractable problems and uses systems thinking to direct funding. Tonight, she shares an insight that has changed the way she thinks about research and life. Please welcome Diane Finegood.
My passion is to talk about how complex is not the same as complicated. It seems like a strange passion, but I think you'll understand it in a second. So when is something complex? Think spaghetti and meatballs. Think lots of small Swedish meatballs that are not all the same and connected by all these long spaghettis that go in a variety of different directions. Terrorism, mental health, climate change, those are all complex problems that we face in our world, and they all have these attributes where there's many different things connecting to many different things, and we have to think about how we can actually address that. I'm not going to talk about terrorism because I don't know a lot about it, but I will talk about obesity because I know a lot about obesity from both the personal and the professional point of view. This picture I've been using probably for 10 years now. It came out in the mid-'80s. And it's an obesity system map. And I know you can't read it, which is great. Often I use it and put a different label on it. But tonight it actually is, you can't read it, so why not? It works well. But the image, the visual of many different factors, many different people, many different organizational structures that are connected by complex relationships that create feedback loops and a dynamic behavior of the system as a whole is what complex is all about. Complicated, you can see how A goes to B goes to C, that sort of thing, and you don't have the feedback loops. But in complexity, you do have that. Now, if we zoom out on that picture, we see something like this. So that picture is made up of different regions, things like physical activity environment, physical activity, food production, food consumption. Those are all parts of that, and the relationships underlying that are clearly more complex. So what are those attributes that make something more complex than it is just complicated? One important one is heterogeneity. We are not all created equal, clearly. Tomatoes come in all shapes and sizes, so do people. We come in all shapes and sizes. If we all looked basically the same, we'd be homogeneous, but in fact we're heterogeneous. There's more than 600 places in the human genome that are associated with human obesity, so it's not as simple as assuming that we can all do the same thing to address that problem. Another aspect of complexity is when something's not terribly predictable. And a study done a number of years ago looked at individuals who had either gained weight or lost weight over the previous 10 years. Asked those people what were the triggers for their weight loss or weight gain. And what do you find out? They're all the same triggers. In other words, you can't predict necessarily whether a relationship problem in an individual is going to cause to weight loss or weight gain. So that makes it not deterministic, it makes it random. And another characteristic is static dynamics. So this, I see the slide's a little bit cut off, but these are some of the characteristics. And think of a sliding scale. So the more heterogeneous the population that you're trying to work with, the more complex that situation. The more nonlinear the relationships, where if you make a little tweak here, you get a big tweak here, that makes it more complex. The more random behavior, unpredictable behavior, that makes it complex, et cetera, et cetera. So clearly, we have many problems in this world that are complex. So what are we going to do in trying to address these problems? The common responses to complex problems are things like retreat, despair, believing the problem's beyond hope, assigning blame. We do that very well, I think, in this day and age of social media. Simple solutions, and occasionally we galvanize our collective effort to try to address that problem. But we all know with obesity, simple solutions is what we hear all the time. Eat less, exercise more. That's all you have to do to lose weight. But the solutions for complex problems are different than that. They're not simple solutions. And one of the things we have to remember is it actually isn't worth spending lots of time trying to figure out what the cause of the problem is. Because if you think that big plate of spaghetti and meatballs, if you try to figure out over here, oh, this is one cause, well, the feedback loops and everything else are going to cause change. So if I tweak over here, it's going to change over here. And that means that the solutions aren't necessarily found in the problems. But there are a number of things that we do need to think about. We need to consider the paradigm of the system. What are the deeply held beliefs that drive the way people's behavior? We need to recognize that individuals actually do matter in a big, messy, complex system, and we need to think about how to match their capacity to the complexity of the task they face. And at a system level, we need to think about how to help it happen, not to make it happen or to let it happen. So let's think, what do we mean by paradigm? Well, let's think tobacco. 30, 40 years ago, smokers were cool, right? And so that made it very easy for people to smoke. Nowadays, smokers are not terribly cool. And in fact, if you live in Edmonton, you got to go outside and it's 40 below, right? So clearly the paradigm, our deeply held belief about smokers has changed enormously over the last 30 years. And it isn't one thing that caused that paradigm change, but it's that paradigm change that has caused tobacco consumption to go down significantly. And certainly with respect to obesity, paradigms clearly matter. We all walk around with assumptions about individuals simply based on their appearance, and that helps drive behavior. So changing paradigms, considering the paradigms is an important component. Capacity and complexity. We make about 250 different decisions every day about our food choices, and I don't know how many there are about physical activity choices. 250 decisions. Well, that's too many decisions, and we also know that when you make a lot of decisions, you don't make any. And so you go to that default, that easy thing to do, which is that easy food around you. So individuals matter, and like many overweight individuals, or with my genetic component, I should say, I've probably lost hundreds of pounds over my life course. I even was a Weight Watchers teen queen when I was, I think, 16. Anyways, I was meant to bring the sash, but... This is an illustration of probably my most successful weight loss exercise, where I went and lost about 70 pounds over that period of time. So how did I do it? What was successful? I looked for sustainable changes in my behavior. I looked for something that I had the capacity to do and sustain over time. It wasn't a big change, it was a little change. I parked my car far away in the lot and had to walk another 1,000 steps. I continued to do that, lost a little bit of weight. Nope, that's not all I need to do to lose weight. Then I had to add on another behavior, started eating less calories, lowering the fat content of my diet, and on and on. And so, I got to a place where I was able to actually reduce my body weight significantly and kept it off for a significant period of time. So last comment is, we also need to think about not only individuals, but that the system matters. And when we think about systems and complex problems, we can't just let the change happen, bottom up, just let it happen if people have the motivation. We can't make it happen by programming it and making it scientific and orderly and forcing it on people, often called the nanny state in the case of obesity. We need to help it happen. Those are negotiated, influenced. We need to build relationships. We need to enable change, exchange knowledge, those sorts of things. So we need to think about the difference between complex and complicated so that we seek solutions that are appropriate for our complex problems. Thank you very much.